Hello, everyone. Welcome back to part 2 of the short story tutorial. Part 1 is gathering mentor text, and part 2 is getting into the drafting. So let's get started. So part 2 of the short story tutorials is where we go for ideas. You've looked at mentor texts, you've seen some beautiful writing, you see some examples for the voice and the ways to start the short stories. So now the students have to think about, where do I get my idea for my short story? And this is actually really hard. I first, thank you so much for doing short story, because I think students want to create stories and they have so many ideas, but they don't have a lot of practice, and teachers don't have a lot of practice writing them either, because it just frankly doesn't happen a lot in the classrooms. So thank you for doing this, but trying to decide what to write and how to pull something that might actually be truth and make it fiction, or have something wild and make it work as a story. So let's always start with what the student already has in their notebook, because if you've been doing the daily writing and you've had like images for students to write or sentence starters for short stories, your students probably already have something that they already drafted related to a story, right? So we want to make sure that we get into our notebooks again. So go into the notebooks with your students, have them spend some time flipping through to see if anything is already a short story, or something that's true could be fictionalized, or maybe there's even a topic in their letter, for example, the delivery disaster. Maybe that can be turned into fiction, right? Or maybe the impatient barista on August 28th, maybe the impatient barista can be turned into a fiction story, right? Or maybe the monkey attack, right? The monkey attack, maybe that's fiction, maybe that's like a news report, I don't know. That could be turned into fiction. So all of these have potential, and so the students don't have to start with a blank page. The other thing is for them to circle into their heart map. Now, most of the heart map is truth, things that have happened to them, things that they care about, things that they love. But they could take something that happened to them and fictionalize it with a different character or a different setting. So maybe it's, objects that are important, like my phone. Maybe this is a character who refuses to use a phone. Whoa, mind-blowing, science fiction. Or circling back to my father dying, maybe it's a story about a grandparent dying, right? If students like to write about serious things, and maybe it's in a different setting, maybe it's set in Spain, or set in Oklahoma, which is where I am, right? So you can, I don't know, I haven't really done this before, but now I'm kind of intrigued, like if I could pull pieces from my heart map and make something new in a fiction setting, it might be interesting. However, even going through all those steps, and I'm telling you the truth, right? I've done this a lot of times with my students. Some students will still say, I don't have anything in my notebook. They have pages and pages in the notebook, but they're going to say, I don't have anything in my notebook. So it's helpful to have some story starters and see if they can like get started, get some ideas going there. So here's a few resources: Scholastic Story Starters, the Literacy Shed, Masterclass of Flash Fiction, The Right Life. These places you can go with like one sentence, two sentences, and then to see where the students are going to take it. It's helpful to remember that these stories are about youth, about being teenagers, so they should take one of the prompts and then set it into a place that they're familiar with, or a place that they want to go to is a good way to do it. So here's several story starters that immediately kind of have a problem, and then it's really up to the character, to the writer, to figure out how to solve it. So any of these story starters are great. I've used them in my classroom before, and they have some wonderful stories, but it's still not as wonderful as the ones that the students find in their notebooks. I'm just saying. Okay, here's the important part as they're working on fiction, which is really hard to do: making sure that there's a plot. So even if students have a draft, which is great, they have a draft, or they make a new draft with one of those story starters, you have to spend some time with them to make sure that there's an actual story. So I have a few ideas here. Okay. What does your character want? So after students have a draft, I would have a day to talk about what does your character really want? What does they really want? So the one thing that they feel that they have to have, or the one thing that they'll find anything. Oh, fight. It should say fight. The one thing that they'll fight anything and anyone for, right? It could be something physical. It can be an idea. It can be a status. Whatever it is, the character needs to be something. Needs to be something. It needs to be something that your character feels will make his or her life, their life better if they only had this thing, right? So if they only had this friend, if they only had this phone, if they could only hide, if they could only have world peace, I don't know. But typically it's something like they just want to belong. They just want to belong. And they might think, oh, I need to be on the cheerleading team, or I need to make the soccer team. And the main character, right? But there has to be some obstacles getting in their way, right? And so the ending may not be that they actually get on the soccer team. The ending might be something different, something like that. But you have to think about, what does this character want more than anything? Whether it be, whether or not the feeling is true will be determined how you end the story. So that's saying, like, if the character really wants to be on the soccer team, by the way that you choose as the writer to end the story is going to point to the theme of, yes, work hard and make it on the soccer team, or no matter how hard you work, sometimes it just doesn't work out. So maybe not a happy ending. So the writer gets to decide, but you first have to know what the character really wants or needs. Maybe that's better. What the character wants, but then where you end the story is what the character really needs. Ooh, that's good. Yeah, make that a mini lesson. What does your character want more than anything? And then what does your character need? In order to answer those questions, though, the writer has to kind of know something about their character. So it would be helpful to write a little backstory about the character, get a sense of what they really want, and then what a sense of what they really need, that they may not know about. And then it's important to add some conflict, right? So, and you need an obstacle. The story, what is stopping the character from getting what they really want or what they really need? And it's usually some sort of obstacle. So in a short story, there's not a lot of time for a ton of obstacles. So you have to help your student writers figure out what could be one obstacle to getting what the character wants, and that either in overcoming the obstacle or not overcoming the obstacle, the character actually gets what they need or what they should want. Okay. So what is the character? Who is the character? What do they want? What do they really need? What might be some obstacles standing in their way? Okay, and so this is where the theme comes in. The theme comes in with the way that the way that the writer ends the story, right? So your theme is sort of a moral argument of your story. It's about how you want your readers to be impacted by the story. And yeah, we want something satisfying for the reader at the end, but we also want the reader to think about something in a new way, or to experiencing something from a new way. And what I love about the teen, youth, middle and high school writers writing short stories is that I always learn something a little bit new coming from their perspective that I may not as an adult, because they have different messages, and it's an opportunity for anyone who's reading these stories to figure something out that they know to be true. So just some thinking about the theme when it comes to the ending. So these are things that you want to have in mind when your students are coming with a great idea. Have them write those ideas out, write that first draft, but then ask those questions. What does the character want more than anything? Now, what does the character really need? And what are the obstacles? Who or what is standing in the way? And sometimes it's the own character standing in their way of true happiness, right? But sometimes there's other characters. Sometimes this is where you could do a mini lesson on conflict. Sometimes the reason that what stands in the way is nature. Sometimes it's technology. Sometimes it's another person. Sometimes it's themselves. So person versus society, person versus nature, this is where you get the conflict in. So think about this, like when you're teaching students to write a short story, you're really also teaching them how to understand short stories and plot. Okay, I know that was a lot, but this is really it's actually kind of a difficult genre to work with, but these questions are going to help you help your students. All right, so I want to circle back to those story starters I told you. So one story starter, icy fingers gripped my arm in the darkness. First person narrator, right? What does this character want? To be safe, to heal, to find love? Who or what is keeping them from this? It could be internal, self-doubt. It could be external. This could be an enemy or a ghost, right? What decision or outcome will not only help the character, but might also help the readers? If the character discovers safety comes from a rational choice, if the character faces fears to heal, if the character accepts love from an unexpected person, it could be any of these things depending on the story. Another story starter, as she walked along the street, the tiny dragon in her pocket stirred restlessly. I love this. What does that character want? More than anything, friendship, a purpose, true potential. What or who is keeping them from this? It could be an internal, maybe they need confidence. It could be external, a person who wants to hurt the dragon, maybe, I don't know. And then what decision or outcome will not only help the character, but might help the reader who's reading the story? Well, maybe the character makes a new friend who helps her return the dragon to a castle. I don't know. Or discovers powers to save the dragon. It's pretty great. And then the last one, it was the last time I tried that. It's a great story starter. What does this character want? Well, it's up to the writer to decide, but does the character want to be a singer, write for a newspaper, go to a school dance? It could be any of those things, be whatever the students can imagine, right? Now, who or what is keeping them from this? It could be internal, a fear of something or lack of talent. External, it could be money, time, a difficult teacher. And then what decision or outcome will not only help the character, but help the reader? So this would point to the theme. Discovers that you can do what you love, even if you're not the best, or writing well requires feedback, one of those things. So this might be a chart that you try in your class. I kind of imagine it being something where you would have a few people with their drafts, and maybe they make this chart, like what's the story, what does the character want, who or what is keeping them from this, and then what decision or outcome will help the character and the reader. So this might be a great tool that you can use in your classroom. Okay, that's it for part 2. Come back for part 3.